She comes to the university early in the morning, washes the floors, and secretly writes down formulas in a worn notebook. One day, she raises her hand and asks a question that no one dared to ask. The professor calls her to the board, and everything that was hidden comes to light. But the main thing happens not at the board, but after, when the truth about her becomes stronger than the silence in which she lived. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you don't miss new stories. Grace Palmer walked into the Westbridge building long before the first footsteps of students had trotted out into the hallways. Outside, the light was just beginning to melt, and the snow that covered the stone steps crunched faintly beneath her boots. She was carrying a bucket, gloves, a small bag with a sandwich for Ruby, and, as always, her tattered notebook. The notebook was hidden deep in her bag behind a bottle of water and a packet of wet wipes, as if it were something forbidden. Not that she had ever considered numbers forbidden. That day, the university was hosting its annual symposium on applied mathematics. Notices hung in every hallway, and Professor Leonard Craig, the department chair, had his name printed larger than the rest. He was to give a talk on intuitive errors in theoretical models. Grace had heard of him, often. In the hallways, he was feared, respected, shunned, but no one disputed that he was a genius. Or at least he could convince others of it. After her shift, Grace changed into a soft gray sweater, combing her hair with her fingers, and walked up the side stairs to the main hall. The symposium had already begun. She sat in the last row. No one stopped her. She was not in anyone's way. Craig stood on the stage, tall, with a neatly trimmed beard, wearing a black jacket. His voice was smooth but sharp, like steel scissors. The problem with modern popular mathematics, he said, is that intuition takes precedence over precision. The ability to feel a formula replaces knowledge, as if you could drive a car without understanding what a brake is. Some laughed. Some took notes. Grace watched, listened. And then she raised her hand. He didn't notice her right away. But when he did, he fell silent. Yes? Excuse me. Her voice was soft but ringing. You are talking about an error in smoothing the parameters in the third expression. But you have substituted the data before the variable z. Wouldn't the carry under the module then give a distorted sum? Craig narrowed his eyes. Excuse me, but who are you? My name is Grace. I work here. Are you working? I clean, in the evening shifts. A light whisper passed through the hall. Someone chuckled. And you understand modules? I just noticed, that's all. Craig picked up the chalk and turned to the board. Then maybe you could show me how you would do it. He turned. I don't mind. Sometimes a fresh perspective is just what formal science needs. Someone in the room stifled a chuckle. Grace stood up. She walked slowly down the steps. As she passed the rows, she heard someone holding his breath, someone leaning back in his chair with an expression of boredom. But she walked without looking up. She took the chalk from the board, she drew a line, she labeled the variables. And she began to explain. If you look only at the module, you can miss the phase shift. But if you transfer the equation through a transformation, not analytically, but through dynamics, you get this. Her hand was shaking. But the equations were written smoothly and neatly. In 3 minutes, everything was written. The room was silent. Even Craig. She turned around and put the chalk down. Sorry if something is wrong. Craig walked up to the board. He looked. Then again. Silently. The smile disappeared. He ran his finger over the formula. Interesting, he muttered. Who taught you? Nobody. I read. In the library. Sometimes. In the kitchen. He turned to the hall. Who among you has seen this solution before? Nobody raised their hands. At that moment, a woman from the gallery stood up. Excuse me, she said. I'm Dr. Helena Nguyen. I teach at Stanford. Could you repeat that last transformation? Grace came closer, explained, quietly, slowly, and again, clearly. It's, Nguyen began, published a month ago in a European magazine. But you haven't read it? No, Grace replied. I was just trying to figure out how it should move. Professor Craig stood silently. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. Thank you, Grace said. I have to go. I have a daughter. She has a test. She left. Simply, as if nothing had happened. And behind her, there was silence, in which for the first time people began to look not up, but to the side, to where before there had been just a cleaning lady and an old notebook with formulas, which no one thought to read. The next morning, the university was bustling with its usual routine. The symposium had ended, and the hallways were once again filled with the click of heels, the rustling of papers, and the voices of students unsure of the answers, but willing to pretend they knew more than they felt. Grace walked through the West Wing, carrying a cart with a plastic bottle of hand sanitizer rattling on it. She moved faster than usual. The equations still echoed in her head as if they were imprinted on the air around her. As she passed the mathematics department, she stopped. On the board by the door hung a photo from the symposium, small, framed, like the news of the day. Grace, at the board, in a gray sweater, holding chalk. The caption, Informal Participant. Surprising Solution. Symposium 2025. She turned away. It felt strange. Not pride, not shame. Something in between, like being put on stage when you just wanted to sit in the audience. When she entered the cleaning staff's office, Lena was already there, an elderly woman with a voice reminiscent of the rustling of a bag. Did you see what you did there? She asked, putting the thermos on the shelf. They say the professor almost went gray a second time. It was an accident, Grace muttered. Darling, you might accidentally trip, and you just went and laid them on their shoulder blades. They say you were invited to the department? Nobody called. Bye. Grace received a note that afternoon, on plain white paper, handwritten. Would appreciate a chat. Dr. Helena Nguyen, room 302, anytime convenient for you. She turned it over in her hands for a long time, then put it in her pocket, as if it were a lottery ticket that you don't dare look at. Room 302 was bright. The window looked out onto the courtyard, where students sat on the rocks with laptops, like seagulls by a fountain. Helena sat by the window, in a loose-fitting shirt, her hair pulled back, her hands folded in front of her. Grace? She stood up. Thank you for coming. I'm not sure that's right. Why? Because I'm still cleaning floors, not lecturing. And what? Grace looked down. I don't want this to sound like a claim. I'm not demanding anything. I just love numbers. Sometimes I hear them when I'm making coffee. Sometimes they come to me in my sleep. And when I write them down, it becomes easier. Helena listened attentively. Can I look at your notes? Grace pulled out a notebook. An old cover, dog-eared corners, formulas written by hand, with notes on the side. Must not forget. Come back later. If you move it, there will be music. Helena turned the pages slowly, sheet by sheet. These are not just calculations. You have your own rhythm, your own geometry of thinking. I want you to speak, in front of the students, informally, without pressure. I can't speak. You already said everything you needed to yesterday. Just repeat it. Only not in the last row, but in the first. Grace was silent for a long time. Can I take my daughter? Certainly. Then I'll think about it. On the way out, she stopped, took out her phone, and wrote, Today, it seems, something has changed. I don't know how to explain, but I'll pick you up early. We're not going home. We're going to the library. And sent Ruby. The answer came almost immediately. Okay, Just let's buy a cake, okay? She smiled. Sometimes even a short equation can change the whole system, especially if it is said by a person whom no one wanted to hear before. The day was gray. The sky was overcast, and a light fog slowly crept up the steps of the university, hiding the asphalt under a thin veil. Grace walked slowly, holding on to the strap of her bag, inside which lay a notebook. Not the one with the notes, but a new one. A clean one. Only yesterday she had dared to open the first page. When she entered the assembly hall, the students were not there yet. It smelled of dust, coffee, old wood, and something vaguely familiar, anticipation. Helena sat by the stage, looking through the list. "Grace." She looked up and smiled. "You're early. I didn't know how long it would take to get ready. Do you want to sit down?" "I'd rather stand." They were silent. Then Helena said, "If you get into trouble, just talk. Or don't talk. Sometimes a pause speaks louder than a lecture." "I'm not sure that I have a lecture, more like a story." The best thing we can give is a story that we ourselves believe in. The first students began to file in. Some were whispering, some were smiling, some were looking at Grace with confusion. Her name was on the program. No title, no honorifics, just Grace Palmer. When the lights went out, a soft silence fell over the room. Grace walked to the podium. She placed her notebook in front of her. She picked up a glass of water, took a sip, and began. "My name is Grace. I'm not a professor. I work here at the university. My job is order. Floors, boards, windows. I didn't go to college, but I've always had a love for numbers." She opened the notebook. "I didn't know that you could understand formulas without knowing the terms. But one day, when I was wiping the board, I saw an equation. It looked beautiful, like it wanted to say something." The hall was quiet. "I started rewriting, then looking for similar ones, then trying. Sometimes I couldn't do it. Sometimes I cried. But every time I decided on something, I felt like I had a voice." She looked up. "I didn't want to prove anything at the symposium. I just saw a mistake. And I decided to ask. I thought that after that I would be thrown out. Or laughed at. But they heard me." She paused. "Do you know what the hardest thing is? Not to raise your hand, but to allow yourself to believe that you have the right to be among those who speak." Someone in the room nodded. "Today I will not teach you. I will simply ask, do not shut yourself up, even if you think that your question is stupid, because sometimes it is the key, and you are the person who was waiting for the task." She closed the notebook. "Thank you." The hall was silent for another moment, and then applause. Not loud, not stormy, but real. After the speech, a girl approached her, red-haired, wearing glasses, with notes in her hands. "Excuse me, can I ask a question?" "Certainly." You really never studied?" Only silence. It is the best teacher." "Can I someday show you my work?" "I would be glad." Later, when she was about to leave, Helena approached her. "Did you see the faces?" "Yes." They listened. They didn't listen. They absorbed. "This is unusual. But it's fair." It was evening outside. The air had become cleaner. There was no rain, only a slow, breathing clearing. Grace walked to the car. Ruby was at her window. She had headphones on, a book on her lap. "How did it go?" the daughter asked. "Fine." "Were you worried?" "Very." "But you did it?" "I did it." Ruby took her hand. "I'm proud of you." Grace clenched her fingers. "And I you." And then she added, "Go forward, even if you are afraid. The main thing is not to go back. Because sometimes, to hear yourself, you just need to take a step where they do not applaud you. But just look, and begin to believe." The university had been especially quiet since the morning. It seemed as if even the building had exhaled. The symposium was over, the conversations had died down a bit, and the sunlight, penetrating through the large windows, fell slowly, as if it didn't want to disturb the silence. Grace was sitting in the small staff room. In her hands was that same old notebook, pages with yellowed edges, covered with formulas, arrows and notes on the side. Check, too complicated, worked. The door opened without knocking. Helena looked in, as if checking if it was too early. "Grace, can I?" "Certainly." Helena came in and sat down opposite. She was wearing a light blouse, simple, without decorations. Her hair was pulled back into a soft bun. There was a restrained ease in her movements. "I brought something," she said, handing over a folder. "It's a copy of an article about that very technique you intuitively used. I thought you might be interested in seeing it." Grace opened the folder. Printed text, graphs, formulas, all neatly checked, with references, with names. She ran her finger over the title and frowned slightly. "I don't understand. Why is this getting so much attention? It's just a decision." "Exactly. But you came to it without a laboratory, without a team, without access to journals. And you did it naturally, through thinking. For the Academy, this is not just a result. It is a challenge. I didn't mean to challenge. You didn't quit. You were just being yourself. And that's much more dangerous." Grace looked down. "I'm still afraid, Helena. I'm afraid that someone will say, 'She doesn't know anything,' or 'She just happened to be here.' I'm not a mathematician. I'm a cleaning lady with a notebook." "That's just part of you," Helena said softly. "The other part is the person who saw meaning in an empty equation. Do you know how many students I have who are afraid to approach a problem without a hint? You are not an accident. You are a reminder that knowledge does not belong to those who speak loudest." Grace sighed. "Ruby asked yesterday, 'Are you going to be a professor now?' I didn't know what to answer. Do you want to? I want to not be afraid. Just go into the room and talk, not hide my notebook." "Then let's start small. I have a suggestion. You can become a scientific consultant on our course on alternative methods. Not as a professor, but as a person who sees differently. You don't need to lecture. Just be there. Listen. Sometimes give hints. And be an example. Aren't you afraid of condemnation?" "I fear silence more, because it kills curiosity." Grace smiled, for the first time that day. For real. "Can I think about it?" "As much as you like." After the meeting, she went to the library, not to borrow a book, just to feel a part of it. It smelled of paper and dust and light. Students were whispering. Some were sleeping between the shelves. Some were eating an apple, hiding it in a notebook. Grace went to an empty table, took out her notebook, and simply flipped through the last few pages. Among the formulas, there is a note on the side. If it works out, it will be beautiful. On her way back, she passed Professor Craig's office. The door was open. He was sitting at his desk, his eyes downcast. As she passed, he looked up. "Miss Palmer?" "Yes?" "I wanted to thank you for the symposium and for the lesson. I didn't teach anything. But you made me reconsider one thing. A formula without ethics is just a number." She nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Craig." He didn't answer. He just nodded in response, and that was more than a whole speech. When Grace returned home, Ruby was already waiting for her in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a pie. "You look different," she said, looking closely. "What exactly has changed?" "You've grown taller, not in height, inside." Grace sat down, picked up her cup, took a sip, and suddenly said, "Do you know that a formula is just a way to tell the world what you think?" "No." "Then tomorrow I'll show you. On paper. And you, in space. After all, you want to become an astronomer?" Ruby smiled. "I want to. Can I borrow your notebook?" "Of course. Now you can." Spring came early to Westbridge. The trees on the campus walkway began to shed their buds. The grass became brighter. The air became lighter. Even the math building seemed to have changed. The windows opened more often. The students smiled a little more freely, and the blackboards in the classrooms began to display formulas written with explanations that were not only strict, but also understandable. Grace sat in what was now, officially, the problem-solving consultant's assistant room. The sign was printed and taped to the desk, but she liked how simple it looked. The room was bright. There were flowers on the windowsill, and on the desk were 2 notebooks, her own and a new one from a student named Jason, who had brought in his work for grading with a note that said, "Can I just write what I think?" Of course, she told him then. That's exactly how it should be. There was a knock at the door. "Can?" "Come in, Ruby." The girl walked in, holding a thick book on astronomy and a laptop, and a transparent plastic container with apples sticking out of her backpack. "I decided to come here," she said, putting her backpack on the floor. "To Westbridge?" "Yes, I want to study here. Here. You can be yourself." "You've always been yourself, Ruby. I'm just not afraid now." They sat down next to each other. Grace took her hand. "I spoke to Helena yesterday. She said that after your math report in the club, one boy went home and drew a model of a black hole, without formulas. But correct. I just said that the formula is not fear. It is a language. And you can learn a language without fear. You always speak more correctly than I do," Grace smiled, "because you taught me." A bell rang in the hallway. Students came out of class. Some were laughing, some were arguing. Soft light was pouring in through the window. In an hour, Grace was scheduled to go out to an open meeting with the new freshmen. It was her first official engagement as a guest mentor. She was nervous, not from fear, but from significance. When she walked onto the stage, the room went quiet, not because someone was demanding silence, but because everyone wanted to hear. "Hello, my name is Grace Palmer. I am not a professor. I came to this university with a bucket and a rag. And now I am standing here, not because I became someone else, but because one day I was not afraid to ask a question." She stopped, looking at the students. "If you are afraid of being misunderstood, ask questions. If you are not sure about the solution, look for your own, because sometimes the most important knowledge comes not from above, but from the side, from someone who just saw it a little differently." Ruby sat in the front row, looking at her mother as one would look not at a hero, but at a person who no longer needed to be doubted. After the performance, a young man with glasses approached Grace. He spoke quietly. "Thank you. I wanted to leave the course. I thought I wasn't suitable, but now I want to try again." "Then let's start with something simple," she said. "Show me where you're confused." Later that evening, he and Ruby walked across campus. The sun was setting, the leaves on the trees turning golden in the rays. The campus was breathing evenly. "Mom? Are you happy?" Yes. I didn't think I'd say that. But yes. Did you ever think that all this would happen? Never. And yet it is you." Grace stopped, looked at her daughter, hugged her tightly. "And now it's you, too." They walked on, quietly, without words, because at that moment there was no need to speak. Everything was already written, not in the equations, but in the fact that one day a cleaning lady in a gray sweater dared to ask a question, and changed the whole world.